You know, this skater drew a lot of press during his career, not because he was a dirty player, but he was involved in so many of the weirdest and non-trades in NHL history and the weirdest contract disputes. He could have played forever, but at the age of 37, he couldn't get along with Minnesota management and eventually retired pretty well. A lot of people feel at the peak of his career. Strange to be at your peak, your second decade into the NHL, but here we were. Now today we're going to be talking about the interesting case of the talented Murray Oliver. Now Murray Oliver, for a lot of people, was the most underrated skater ever to play with the Boston Bruins. Now, Murray Oliver came to major prominence in major junior actually with the very, very respected and popular Hamilton Tiger Cubs. He played part of 5 seasons with Hamilton. In his best campaign was his last, where he had 90 points in 52 games. Now, at the time, there was no NHL draft. His rights were owned by Detroit. He played 1 game with Detroit in 58, had 1 assist. The next season, he spent some time with the Edmonton Flyers, scoring 33 goals in 64 games. Now, Detroit brought him up for the full season, or most of the season, in 1960, and even 20 goals and 1 goal in the playoffs. Now, 1961 was a weird year for him. There was no more room, I'd say, at the Nest in Detroit, so he was traded to the Bruins with Tom McCarthy and Gary Alcorn for Leo Labine and Vic Stasiak, of all people. Now, in Boston, this is where he became his major draw for the fans and for the opposition, because they would always center on Oliver, no pun intended. Now, Oliver, who is a big cat, 5'10", 165, played on the famous bow line with wingers Johnny Busick and Tommy Williams, where he starred as a crafty stick handler and patient playmaker. He put up an NHL career-high 68 points in 1964, despite knee surgery the prior season. He was eventually traded in 1967 to the Toronto Maple Leafs for, in cash, for, of all people, Eddie Shack. Now, with Toronto, he centered the line for 3 years with Bobby Pulford and Ronnie Ellis. Now, Olivier Oliver was eventually traded again on March 2nd, 1970, which was then officially announced May 26, to the Minnesota North Stars in exchange for Terry O'Malley, the rights to Brian Conacher, and cash. Terry O'Malley, of course, and Brian Conacher, part of the Team Canada program. Now, previously, the Maple Leafs had attempted to trade Oliver to St. Louis for goalie Jacques Plante, but an excess of centers for St. Louis prevented the deal. Similarly, the Chicago Blackhawks were involved in a possible trade, but Chicago's price of Oliver and Bob Pulford in exchange for Jim Pappen, which would return to Toronto after being traded at a bizarre Palat deal, was too high for the Maple Leafs, prompting the trade in Minnesota. Now, he played 5 successful seasons with the North Stars, helped him in their 71 playoff run that got him as far as the semifinals, and scored a career-high 27 goals in 72. But in 75, after a bitter contract dispute with Stars management were trying to nickel him, dime him on his contract, he decided to retire from the Stars. Now, at the time, he was 38. He could have played another 5 or 6 years easily, because he was always in shape. You know, a very, very dedicated athlete, and we'll see in a second why. In 18 seasons, he played 1,127 regular season games and scored 274 goals with 454 assists for 728 points. Now, in retirement, after playing 5 times in the All-Star game, he was hired by former teammate Lou Nanne as Minnesota's assistant coach. He worked with the club until the 86th season, with 37 games at the head of the squad. He eventually became a scout with Vancouver Canucks and later took over the club's director of pro scouting. Unfortunately, he passed away on November 23rd, 2014 of a heart attack at the age of 77 in Edina, Minnesota. Now, talking about the multiple sports here. He was a baseball star. On June 25th, 58, he was assigned to play for the Batavia Indians, where scouts hailed him as one of the greatest athletes we've ever seen. In his debut, which was delayed because of a broken arm he suffered during the hockey season, he went 0 for 3 and committed 1 error. Over only 8 more games, mostly at third base, he batted .185 and committed an error per game, and was eventually released by the Indians. So in 1983, the year of Minnesota's what you call big playoff runs, unfortunately they lost in the division finals in the 83 campaign. Final coaching record 18-12-7. Now in the playoffs, 25 points in 35 games. Of course, 1971 was the big year. He drove the Montreal Canadiens nuts in the second round. Overall, he had 7 goals, 4 assists for 11 points. After a mediocre regular season with 32 points in 61 games. But talking about career year, ladies and gentlemen, even though he didn't have 56 points in 1975, his 19 goals and 15 assists made him one of the most respected two-way players in the NHL. But the numbers he put up with Boston, he had 3 consecutive 20-goal seasons. In Toronto in 68, 69, and 70, he was the numbers that were expected didn't come about. And Minnesota, his second year there again, career year with 56 points in 77 games. Now, Murray Oliver, for a lot of people, again, one of the most intelligent players ever to play in the NHL. If you ever see any interviews he done with the media, and Stan Fischler had mentioned, if you want to learn about hockey, because playing in Detroit, Boston, Toronto, Minnesota, he learned a lot. One of the smartest gentlemen that were ever in the game. And Murray Oliver had a lot of fans and had respect of all his teammates and opponents. And, you'll never see a player like Murray Oliver again, because how many people is going to quit hockey because management disrespected him? He could easily find a home to WHA, but he was a proud man. Anyway, Murray Oliver, great career. If you like what we're doing here with our Vintage Podcast, give us a like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget, when there were 6 teams in the NHL, players like Murray Oliver would be that player you would need to win the Stanley Cup. He was that good. Thanks for listening. Bye.